For this video, it'll be really helpful to have a blanket. You could probably get away with a pillow if you absolutely don't have a blanket, and maybe kind of a firm pillow. Or you could stack up some towels and roll them up as well, but a blanket would be nice. And 2 blocks, or something else that's sort of firm and has shape would be really useful. Otherwise, you can get creative and modify these things without. We're going to start on our backs, but use your blanket. So I've got sort of the typical rectangle blanket. I'm going to open it up, one little fold, and then roll it. So you're going to roll it kind of the long, skinny way so that you can lie on it. And a pillow would be fine for this. You're completely welcome to put this right up against your bum and then lie back with it all along your spine. I actually like to do it a different way. I'm going to demonstrate a different way. You can find kind of your lowest ribs down here. That connects in right where your mid back and your low back meet. And I'm going to try and put my blanket edge right there and then lay back. Make my tailbone long here. And then I'm going to go feet together and knees apart. You want to have your legs relaxed here, so you don't want to be sitting here miserable thinking about how tight your inner thighs are. Instead, put something under your legs to where you feel pretty relaxed in this position. A big part of what we're going to work on is starting to calm down our nervous system, because that will let your muscles relax and will allow for a little bit more of a release. So find this position. If this is really uncomfortable, you can always stretch your legs out or bend your knees straight up, put them in a different position. Let your arms relax away from you in some way. And then maybe close your eyes. Definitely begin to lengthen, slow your breath. Take one full breath in through your nose. Hold at the top of your inhale, and then exhale through your mouth. Now keep your back teeth separated, your jaw relaxed, and close your mouth. Breathe in and out through your nose. You're going to take several breaths to lengthen your exhales. This will help start off your practice with a calm nervous system. See if you can get a little heavier into your props toward the ground. Notice if you're holding any tension in your legs or your glutes, your abdomen. And we'll take about 3 more breaths here. At the end of your 3rd exhale, use your hands to gently bring your knees back up toward the ceiling. And move your blocks out of the way. And roll to one side so that you can pull your roll out. You can keep it rolled up though, because now you're just going to take it underneath your bum. So you want it to be kind of right about tailbone height. Find a place where you feel pretty stable. Again, I try and create some length, like pull my butt flesh down toward my heels. And then get on there. Now we'll come back to feet together, knees apart. Take your arms wide. And we'll start to do a little bit of a twisting motion here. So you'll take your right knee up toward the ceiling and across. And you're going to actively reach your right knee forward and to the left so that it tries to stack on top of your left knee. And it doesn't have to stack, but you're going to reach for it. So you start to get some length through your back and through your hip. You'll come back to center and go to the other side. You might notice a little discomfort where your rear meets your blanket roll, and that's by design. I'm trying to do a little massage work right in there on those glute muscles and your hip muscles. And start to connect this with your breath. So I like to exhale as I stretch, and inhale as I come back to center. And if your breath moves a little bit faster, you could take more breaths in each position. That's okay too. Just start to really work on connecting your movement and your breath. Let's do one more to each side. The great thing about a video is that if you want to do about 10 more, you can pause, do some more. Then when you come back to center, exhale, draw your knees back up, and widen your feet. So we'll separate your feet to about mat distance apart, which is maybe a little wider than your shoulders. We'll stay up on this blanket roll unless you're just uncomfortable, in which case you can go to the ground, that's fine too. And I'm gonna take my arms overhead. If that's uncomfortable, you don't have to do it. We're gonna windshield wiper here. So now both knees go over to the left. As they go to the left, this top one, your right thigh, is gonna start to stretch. Stretch from your right abdomen toward your right knee. You might get a little butt squeeze in there, that's okay. Starting to lengthen out your hip flexor and the top of your right thigh. Take a full breath in and out, and come back through center and go to the other side. As you do this, stretch from your abdomen towards your knee. Notice if you've got any tension in your jaw or in your shoulders. Relax that. Come back through center. First side again. Exhale as you lengthen. And slowly come back through center and switch sides. Come back to center. Lift your hips and remove your blanket roll. Lower your hips back down, and now you can walk your feet hip distance apart. Cross your right ankle over your left thigh and stretch your arms out side to side. Scoot your hips over to the right just a little bit and drop both legs to the left. So you're keeping this figure 4 shape and taking your right foot to the ground. And then I like to hold on to my shin. If you can reach it, see if you can hold on to your shin somewhere. Breathe here. So we're gonna start to get a little stretch through your right outer hip, outer thigh, maybe into your low back. With your muscles, you can stretch your outer right hip and your right knee away from your face. And that might give you just a little bit of an increased sensation. And then breathe. It's okay to relax that reach for a moment and then do it again. See if you can get a little more length, a little more space. And take one more breath here. And slowly release your reach. Come back to center. Even out your hips and switch sides. Lower your right leg down and cross your left ankle over your right thigh. This time you'll scoot your hips to the left. Lower your legs to the right. And then if you want to take your right hand to your right shin, that's an option. It's also okay if your foot doesn't quite get to the ground. You could stick a block underneath your foot, and that works really nicely as well. Whatever you decide here, soften your jaw, lengthen your exhale, and maybe add that active reach. I like to hold that for a breath, then release my active reach, and do it again. Gently trying to create just a little more space. Take a few more breaths here. One more breath. Slowly come back to center. Scoot your hips back to center and uncross your leg. And slowly roll to one side and press yourself up towards sitting. Now we'll go to hands and knees. If you're like me and have sensitive knees, you might want to unroll your blanket or take your pillow and put it underneath your knees when you go to all fours. When you find hands and knees, try to get your hands, your wrists, a little bit forward of your shoulders. This way we can create a little more length through our whole trunk space. So you can slide your shoulders up toward your ears just a little bit, and that creates length in your side body. Drop your belly, drop your chest, and then let your neck just be as loose as it can be. That's gonna be cow. Inhale. As you exhale, push the ground away from you. Draw your rib cage toward the ceiling, draw your belly toward the ceiling. That's cat. And reverse. Drop your belly, drop your chest. Inhale. Push the ground away. Draw your ribs toward the ceiling, your belly toward the ceiling, cat. And now do that at your own pace for a few breaths. Let's do one more each way. Come back to neutral spine and take downward facing dog. Lift your hips up toward the ceiling. Press the ground away from you. Make sure you have some freedom in your shoulders. And then you can walk out your dog just a little bit, bending one knee and then the other. But pretty quickly, try to come to some stillness in your legs. Turn your right toes out. And then push your right foot into the ground. Lean into your right foot and draw your outer right hip back away from your hands. So you get some opening through your outer right hip, maybe thigh as well. And switch feet. Turn your left toes out. Place that foot down and press into it. Take your outer left hip up and back. Come back to center and walk your feet forward toward your hands for forward bend. You can have your feet about hip distance apart. The key with this pose, especially when we're trying to create some release in your back, is not to be here hanging out with no support and with this arched back. You want to have a nice long back, which means you might need to bend your knees, stick your butt back, and a lot of times you can touch the floor that way. If not, it's fine to have your blocks here so that your hands can help support you just a little bit. They can have that support. So whichever way you're going to do this, relax your head, relax your shoulders toward the ground. And if you can, imagine that all the skin on your back is starting to seep, melt toward the ground with gravity. And allow that to lengthen your spine. Take a full breath in and out. And slowly bend your knees and lengthen your spine. From here, we want to warn our back that we're going to start to stand up and use those muscles. So draw your low belly in, push the ground away from you, and come to standing. Okay, keep your feet about hip distance apart here. We're going to work on one of my favorite things for back release, which is getting a little bit of a side shear and side bend in the spine. So this is going to be a side bend prep. You'll take your right hand to your hip, not really your hip even down here, but more your pelvis, and your left hand to your rib cage. The important thing with this is that your knees stay really straight. So send your feet down to the ground and firm your top thighs. Keep your knees straight, and then push your hips and your ribs in opposite directions, like so. It might be more like just a tiny little movement, and that's okay. Whatever your body does, breathe while you do it. I like to exhale as I do the shear and inhale back to center. And we'll do a few just like this. It's okay to have a little bit of a sensation of tightness in your back, maybe in your outer hip. Sometimes there's almost even like a blocked sensation in your spine. That's okay. Kind of push up against that wall a little bit. And come back to center and do your other side. So right hand to rib cage, left hand to your pelvis, and then push them in opposite directions. Exhale as you go. Inhale back to center. Exhale. Inhale, center. One more exhale. Inhale, center. Maybe one more for good measure. Good. Now, I'm going to turn so we can get back to long length of the mat. We're going to come to a lunge. So start with that forward bent position. You might want to grab your blocks for this, but it's not required. Step your left foot back and come into a lunge with your right leg forward. And now I like to wiggle my foot back until I can really bend my front knee to a square. So one thing that's really important when we're trying to release back and hips is that we can't just do passive stretching the whole time. Your brain really likes to know that there's some support, that there's some control in the system. So to come into this lunge, draw your outer right hip back and in, almost like your upper thighs are squeezing toward one another. Press your back knee straight, and then press your right heel into the ground until you feel like you got a little action in the muscles right where your rear and your hamstring meet. Lengthen your spine away from your heel. Breathe. Create the stability here. And then we'll go back to plank pose. And so find almost that same sort of sensation. Really strong thighs, lengthening your spine away from your heels when you're in plank pose. Take a couple breaths here. Now if you've got a blanket underneath you like I do, you gotta move it. And then we'll come all the way down to your belly. You can lower your knees and then lower down, or get there however you want to. From your belly, we'll come to Sphinx pose, taking your forearms down underneath your shoulders. If you need your elbows further forward, that can be easier on your low back if you've got some tightness when you come into this sort of prone on your belly position. You want to make sure that the tops of your thighs and the tops of your feet are down, meaning get all 10 toes to be able to touch, even the pinky toes, into the ground. Squeeze your outer ankles in toward one another. So you start to really engage this outer calf region. And then push the tops of your feet into the ground so your knees go straight. Push your pubic bone into the ground so that you get a little bit of a lengthening in your low back. And you might be able to see it. I'll do it again. That's relaxed. and that's pubic bone pressing down. Keep that and drag your elbows back until you start to feel some action happening in your mid to upper back. Inhale here. Exhale, release. Inhale, go back into it. Pubic bone down, elbows back, heart curls forward. And take a full breath. Inhale again. Exhale, release. One more. Pubic bone down, tops of your feet down, curl your heart forward. And on your next exhale, release that. Now take your right knee out to the side. Create a little frog leg position here. Now your inner knee and your inner foot are down. So however high you take it, this depends on the mobility of your hip in this moment. If this is really hard on your inner knee, put a blanket under there. And then I like to lift my belly and try and turn my belly away from my thigh that's out to the side. So not a lot happens, but you might feel a little more sensation in your inner thigh. Now we're gonna come down. You can either support your head or you can take your arms out side to side and lie flat. You can turn your head whichever way feels better to you. Once you get into this position, relax and allow your inner thigh to open. Tight inner thighs can really contribute to sensation of tightness in the hips and in your back. You might even want to straighten your right knee. If that feels good, do it. If it makes you tense or it makes your breathing rate increase, then go back. Take slow breaths here. Wait for your next exhale to end. And slowly bend your right knee. If it's straight, take your right leg back to starting position and bring your left knee out to the side. You might feel different side to side, so take that into account. If you're gonna do the belly turn, lift your low belly and see if you can, almost like you're trying to turn your guts to the right. And then come back down. Once again, find the most comfortable position for you. And take a couple breaths here. If it would feel good to straighten your left knee, you're welcome to do that as well. One position isn't better than the other, so pick the one you feel like you're getting the most out of, but where you can also stay relaxed in your face and your breath. Wait for the end of your next exhale. Slowly bend your left knee. Take it back to start. And we'll come to downward facing dog. Just take a moment to notice if your down dog feels any different. And then walk your feet to your hands for your forward bend once again. Relax your shoulders toward your ears. Let your skin draw toward the ground. Wait for the end of your next exhale. And then bend your knees. Look forward. Press your feet down and lift your low belly, preparing to stand. With an inhale, come to standing. And keep your feet hip distance apart again. Just like we did before, you're going to add on to that a little bit to add on a side bend. So send your feet into the ground, firm your top thighs, take your right hand to your pelvis, your left hand to your rib cage. And start the same way we did before, doing that little shear. Make sure that your knees stay straight. Oftentimes one really wants to bend. Now keep this position, keep your legs straight, and slowly roll down so that you're now in a side bend. You can stay right here if this is starting to become a little more challenging, or you can come up and practice your shear. Otherwise, relax your head. Take your left hand straight out, reach it away. Give yourself a little neck release while you're here. Breathe. Push both legs straight, and on an inhale, come back up nice and slowly. Switch sides. Take your left hand to your pelvis and your right hand to your ribs. Shear, keeping your knees straight, and roll your upper body down. So you're in this side bend. Relax your head. Stretch your right arm out. That feels okay. Giving yourself a little neck release. Anytime you're trying to do a neck release, make sure that your back teeth are slightly separated so that your jaw can stay relaxed. And slowly come back up. We'll switch sides again. Left hand to your ribs, right hand to your hip. Shear. Roll down. Make sure your knees stay straight. It's really important that you have a really solid leg foundation when you're side bending, because that tells your brain, okay, it's okay to let your back move a little more. You're welcome to stay here, or you can take your left hand behind your head. You can take your left hand straight overhead. If this bothers your shoulder at all, don't suffer through it. Go back here or take your arms straight up toward the ceiling. You don't want to injure your shoulder trying to do a reach. Make sure both knees are straight and that you're not increasing that pace of your breath. Keep nice long breaths. Slowly come up. Switch sides. Left hand to your hip, right hand to your rib cage. Shear with straight legs, firm thighs. Roll down. You can stay here. Take your right hand behind your head. You can stay here, or you can straighten your elbow out, or take your arm up. Or you can do the neck release like we did last time. Breathe. And then inhale, come back up. Release your hand. Good. Again, if you need your blocks for your lunge, grab them. Come into your forward bend shape. This time, step your right foot back to your lunge. Wiggle it back, bend into your front knee so that you have a nice, solid, square front knee, or as close as you can get. Firm your back thigh and press your left heel into the ground. Draw your outer left hip back so you have that squeezing of your inner thighs. And push your left heel into the ground until you feel a little bit of muscle engagement where your rear meets your hamstring in the back. Lengthen your spine. This is really how you want to feel when you get into plank pose, except you just don't have this front leg here supporting you. And take plank. Hold your plank pose. Be strong through your legs, lengthy through the crown of your head, stretch the crown of your head out, and tone the whole front side of your body. With your next exhale, lower to your belly. This time, take your hands a little bit forward and to the outsides of your shoulders. I usually use like the corners of my mat as a guide. I get mat area. You want to set up your legs just like you did before. Draw your outer ankles in toward one another. Squeeze. Push the tops of your feet down. push your pubic bone down. And then we're gonna come into a cobra shape. So as you come up, you want that same action of drawing your chest forward until you feel that little bit of muscle work in your mid to upper back. If this is too much for your low back, go back down to Sphinx. Inhale. Exhale, lower down. And come up again. Pubic bone down. It's okay if you get a little butt squeeze, especially if you've got strong supportive legs. You're gonna kind of get a squeeze right where your butt and your hamstring meet. And use your upper back muscles. Let them ache a little bit. Exhale, come down. One more time here. Up. And down. Good. Come back to all fours. If you're like me, you're gonna want that blanket underneath you. Coming to hands and knees. Once you get to hands and knees, take your right foot outside of your right hand. Your hands are gonna be inside your foot, and I actually like to turn my right toes out. Now you want your back thigh to pretty much be vertical here. So we're gonna do a variation on lizard where you have your back thigh vertical so that we really take the opening into your outer hip and your hamstring here. Maybe into your back a little too. So as you bend your elbows, you want your forearms to go down to something. If they don't reach the floor, use blocks or any sort of support that you can gather. You can even use a chair for this if you really need to. Right? And find this lizard pose shape. Once you get here, you can look at your hands straight down at the ground, or you can relax your head. Either way is okay today. And do a little bit of a swing. Swing your outer right hip out to the right, and then swing it back in, letting your knee move out. And just notice how that feels. And if you find a spot where you really get a lot of resistance, maybe kind of hang out right in that area, but breathe nice and smoothly. You may even try pressing your right heel into the ground, holding and trying to sink your chest down a little bit more. See what happens when you add a little bit of muscle activation. Hold for 2 more breaths. The end of your second exhale, slowly release. Switch sides. Take your right knee back. Swing your left foot outside of your left hand. Check that your back thigh is vertical, and we'll start to come down. Turn your left toes out just a little bit. That just gives your hip a little more room. And then start to breathe. You can start to swing your left hip out to the left, and then tuck it back and in, letting your knee move out. And do a couple of those. And you might still the swing and push your left heel down into the ground. You push it enough, you're going to get a little more space in your hip, and you might be able to sink your chest down a little bit further. And we'll take about 2 more breaths here. Slowly release. Bring your left knee back. And then we'll come back to sitting. You're gonna need your blanket roll or your pillow. This time we want to make a little roll that's going to go right into your belly. So If you have a lot of sensitivity in your belly, or if you're not really sure what we're gonna do here, you may wanna make a smaller roll. Like I would maybe turn it to where this roll would end up being a little slimmer. Even this is kind of a chunky roll, but that might be okay. You might need something even less, or you might turn it and get the chunkiest roll you can. Just depends on how much discomfort you're willing to endure today. We're gonna actually place this in our abdomen, so your hip flexor muscles actually come up and attach to every level of your lumbar spine or your low back. So in front of those muscles are a lot of guts and fascia or connective tissue. And also, those muscles really play a big role in how your low back feels. So doing a little bit of this abdominal release oftentimes creates a ton of relief for your low back, whether it's because you had some restriction in your gut or because it allows more space for your hip flexors to move. It doesn't matter, oftentimes it works. So if you think about where your belly button is, you want to put the center of this roll right about where your belly button is and lie on your belly. And at first, you might find that you want to brace here and kind of hang out because you don't really want this roll to sink into your gut, but that's what we're going to try to do. So the purpose of this is to try and soften your belly enough to let the roll sink in. And it's okay to take your time to do this. And if you get to where you feel like you can lie flat with your chest down, do that. As you breathe in, your belly will gently push into the roll. And then as you breathe out, your belly's really going to relax and let the roll sink in. For me, I always have to check my glutes because I always want to clench them in this position. So try to unclench if you're like me and are clenching. You start feeling nauseated or panicky, come out of it. You can always go flat to the floor and just do a little belly release, flat to the belly to the floor, or with a smaller roll. If this feels pretty good, you can bend your knees and slowly rock your legs from side to side. Keep that pressure of your belly into the roll. So you really want to go slowly and try to keep that deep roll to belly pressure. Take a couple more breaths right here. And slowly come up. Move your roll down a little bit. So now you just want your pubic bone basically on the roll, giving you a little bit of support for your low back. Keep your forearms down. Bend your right knee. If you feel like that is a ton of stretch, stay right there, maybe rock a little bit. If you can reach your right hand back and catch your foot, do that. And then stretch from your belly to your knee, reaching that away. Go for a little bit of a quad stretch. You don't have to get massive sensation here, although you might, depending on your body. Release, switch sides. stretch from your belly to your knee. Try to lengthen out that thigh bone. That'll also give you length in your low back is really what we're doing here. What we don't want is to have a really arched low back and then to pull your hip flexors tight because that crunches your low back a little more. So we're trying to lengthen. And release that. Come off of your roll. Make it back into a knee support if you were using that before. Come to hands and knees. This time, step your right foot between your hands. Once again, we're going to go for back thigh vertical and come up. You may need a block for this one. I like to have it. So you want your back thigh vertical to start with here especially. And we're going to maintain that. You want a vertical line from your back all the way through your trunk. So what we're trying to avoid is this arching of your belly forward. This cramps your hip flexor here at the hip and also in your low back. So you're actually not creating space in your hip or your low back if you start getting here. So stay nice and vertical here. And we're going to use what we did before, right hand to your hip, left hand to your ribs. And really all that's moving here are your ribs because your hips are kind of stuck. So you move your ribs over and we start the side bend. You just side bend as far as you can. Notice it's really tempting to let your chest come forward. So you want to keep that verticality and do less side bend. This is really going to open up your hip flexor and your spine. Now you could put your right hand down on a block or the floor if you go that far. Your left hand can stay where it is, or it can go to the back of your head, or it can reach straight up, or it can reach overhead. If you can maintain that verticality through your spine so that you're not getting that arch of your back of your belly spilling forward, then you could try and take your pelvis and your right thigh and stretch them forward. So if you need more stretch, more sensation, that's what you do, keeping your belly back. Your hip flexor does not need to have a humongous sensation. That usually just means that you're overstretching your tendons. If you're really tight in your hip flexors, it probably doesn't mean that. It just means you're stretching them. But for people that are more flexible, you don't need a massive stretching sensation. And slowly come back. Switch sides. Take your right leg back and step your left foot forward. Come up. Check that your right thigh now is vertical. And keep your thigh trunk alignment here, kind of that same line. Take your right hand to your hip and your left hand to your, left hand to your hip, right hand to your rib. That'll work better. And start to press your rib cage over to the left and side bend. Notice again if you are spilling forward. Maybe put your left hand on a block, the floor. Check on your breath. You want to be able to take those long, slow breaths. And then if you want, your right hand could go to your head or stretch overhead. Draw your low belly back. You can stay right here, especially if you're getting a lot of sensation. If you need a little bit more and you have the space for it, reach your left thigh bone forward, but don't let your belly spill forward. Take a couple more breaths here. And slowly come up. All right, take your hands back to the ground. Let's do downward facing dog. This will be the last one. Just to give those knees a little bit of a firming here. And then come back down. We'll actually go all the way onto our backs. So you can take your block Or you could take a blanket as well if that feels better for you here. And if you're taking a blanket, you might roll it back up. Otherwise, you'll just need a block and come down onto your back. I'm going to move this. We're going to go for supported bridge. So lift your hips and you want your block to go under your sacrum, which is below the small of your back. Not into the small of your back, but below it. Kind of wiggle around till you're comfortable. If you would rather line up two blocks so that you have a little more of a solid surface, that can feel really nice. You can also put these blocks down on the lowest level. You could also put them on the highest level. Technically, if you want to go up a little higher and that feels good to you, you can. And for this one, we're trying to get length, almost like a little distraction to the back. So separate your shoulder blades, and it's okay to have your feet flat and your knees just bent. You can also drape your knees inward. That'll pull just a little more. So if that's uncomfortable, don't do it. And your goal here, and you could take your arms overhead. Your goal here is to relax your belly and almost let those blocks hold you and let your spine sink toward the ground. And for some of us, that can be way too intense of a stretch. So you may have to tone your belly and gently, gently press your sacrum into the blocks just to control that lengthening a little bit more. Sometimes you can do that and then relax your belly and then press again, kind of alternate. Whatever you choose, keep a relaxed jaw and a relaxed breath. You can stay right here, or if it would feel nice to do little, gentle, slow windshield wipers. Sometimes that's just a really nice feeling thing to do on the blocks. If you're windshield wipering, even yourself out. And come back to center. If your knees are together, separate them. And slowly begin to press your feet into the ground. Nice even pressure. Allow it to build really slowly so that you don't surprise your really relaxed back. And slowly lift your hips up. Move your blocks. And one vertebra at a time, roll. As you roll down, you want to keep that one vertebra at a time thing going until your sacrum, that area that was resting on the block, rests on the floor. This is going to be sort of a neutral spine. So from this relaxed neutral spine, keep that alignment, press your heels down, and lift your hips. So you're not going to reverse roll. You're actually going to have really solid neutral alignment as you lift your hips. And then slowly, one vertebra at a time, roll down. Make sure you roll all the way until you can relax and your sacrum sits on the ground. Keep that neutral alignment, push into your heels, lift your hips. I like to do this on an inhale. And then exhale as I roll. If you can't exhale for as long as you're rolling, you might have to take an extra breath if that's completely fine. Let's do one more like this. From neutral, lift. And as you exhale, roll. And slowly draw your knees in. You can hug them in toward your chest, but then take that sacrum area back down and put one hand on each knee. I'm gonna do some little figure eights, it's like little hip juicers here. So you're gonna take one knee forward and one knee back, then both of them go out to the side, circle. One knee forward, one knee back, out to the side, circle. So just keep going in that same direction, making some little figure eights. This is also brain exercise. Then switch directions of your figure eights. It's okay if it takes a couple of tries. There is a more infuriating version of this brain exercise that we'll do another time. And draw those back to neutral. Now take both knees in the same direction and make circles. These are sacrum circles, so we're just kind of circling around that triangular sacrum bone at the base of your spine. There are a lot of ligaments and tissues in that area that have pressure sensors, so they tend to respond to rolling. And go to the other side. And draw your knees straight in, hug them in, take a breath in and out. Take your arms out side to side and drop your knees to the left. And here you want to get into a place where you can really relax your legs. So if your legs kind of get wonky, or if you need to stack them differently, do. I like to turn my upper back flatter to the ground. And you can turn your head in either direction if that feels good. And for just a couple of breaths, see if you can completely relax your legs, your glutes, and your abdomen. Before you move, gently tone your abdomen, gently, and draw your legs back into center. If you did any hip scooting, and scooch them back to center, and take your legs the other side. Find that relaxed position, and work to relax your legs and your belly. If you feel like you've got a lot of softness there, send your attention up to your face, to your jaw, and your shoulders. Relax there. As useful as any stretch, the ability to train your brain to know when it's okay to relax, when it's okay to let all those tissues soften and release. At the end of your next exhale, very gently tone your belly, and then move, bringing your legs back through center. Even out your hips if they're uneven. And we'll rest in Shavasana. You can straighten your legs out, heels toward the corners of your mat. You can take a roll under your knees if that feels good, but I'm going to do something a little different here today that you might try. I'm going to actually take this folded blanket and kind of lengthen my butt flesh toward my heels. But then as I straighten my legs, I'm gonna pull this blanket right up to my kind of that lower butt crease where your rear meets your hamstrings. Still taking my heels out to the corners of my mat for Shavasana, but just letting this blanket support my thighs. It's a little different, but see what you think. Whatever you do, whichever you choose, find some ease here. And if you can't change something, you can bend your knees, you can put your legs up a wall, you can put your legs in a chair. And now don't worry about controlling your breath at all. Simply try to relax your body so that it gets heavier and heavier with every exhale. Stay here as long as you're able. Enjoy your rest.